and we went to Kodak, to the lab, and they were set up to take that film right in there, and we watched through the glass as they processed the film. When the film was processed, they took us into a screening room and they showed us that piece of film. It's only, I believe, 22 seconds long, and it was a devastating piece of film. Everybody sat there in stunned silence.
We were setting up an office in a hotel in downtown Dallas, and I got a phone call. This would have been about 5 or 6, maybe an hour after we arrived, from one of our stringers, part-time correspondent, who was in police headquarters. She said she had heard from a cop that a local businessman named Abraham Zapruder had photographed the entire assassination on his home movie camera, and she thought I ought to have that information. I said, boy, should I.
The expectation of the readership of Life, which was really the cross-section of America, would be that they would have the definitive story, and the pictures and all of the action that had happened. It was seen as the national diary. It was seen as the pages that would one day become history.
For the next 5 hours, I called every 15 minutes. And finally, at 11 o'clock, I called and this weary voice answered. And I said, is this Abraham Zapruder? Yes. I said, I've been told that you photographed the assassination of the president from this afternoon. Is that correct? Yes. He was answering literally in monosyllables. I said, did you get it from beginning to end? Yes. I said, have you had the film processed? Yes. I said, do you have the film with you? Yes. I said, can I come out and see it now? No. He had been driving around for 2 or 3 hours, been to his country home. He was so upset by what he had first witnessed and then seen on film. He was exhausted and disheartened, and he didn't want me there. And I think in this business, you know when to press and when not to press. And I said, may I see it in the morning? He said, yes, come to my office at 9. So I got there at 8. As I arrived, so did a car full of Secret Service agents. So he took us into a little room where he had hung a sheet on the wall and this creaky old projector. And he put the film in the projector and said, turn off the lights. And I suddenly realized that I was going to see this film, and more importantly, I was going to see it with Dallas Secret Service agents who were about to view the catastrophic non-execution of their most important duty, which is to protect the president. And I thought, these poor guys. I've never seen it since then without wincing, knowing that frame 313 was coming up, but of course we knew nothing about what to expect then. Suddenly the top of the president's head simply disappears in a great spray of blood and brain matter, and there wasn't a person in that room that didn't go, ah. I mean, it was literally as if you'd just been slugged in the stomach. To myself, I said, well, my God, Life magazine has got to have this film.
When I came to work about 9, there was already a huge crowd in our offices. People yelling and screaming, I'll give you $150,000 for that. And I remember the number vividly because there was a man sitting at my desk in my office telling me that to get out of there while he was using the phone, that I was ruining a $150,000 deal. And I told him to get out of my chair and get out of my office and go use the phone somewhere else. And I walked into where Abe Zapruder was, and he was with the fellow, I believe his name was Richard Stolley, from Time Life.
I said, Mrs. Zapruder, that's a very powerful piece of film you have out there, and Life magazine would like to have it, and for unusual pieces of film like this, we sometimes will pay more than our usual space rates for it. And I said, for that film, we might even go up to $15,000. And he just looked at me and smiled.
Mr. Stolley was very gentlemanly, quiet. He was obviously shaken by the event, and he showed some compassion. The fellows outside were screaming and trying to get to Zapruder.
He was a businessman, but not a hugely successful one, and he realized that financial security of his family could be enhanced by this film. The second priority, and one that I honestly believe was as important to him, is that it not be exploited. He described to me a nightmare that he'd had the previous night, only a few hours after taking this film, that he was in Times Square, walking through Times Square, and he suddenly looked up, and there was a movie marquee with "See the President Get Shot." I finally got to $50,000, and I said, Mrs. Zapruder, you know, in all candor, this is as far as I can go. I urge you to accept this with our promises that we will take the kind of care with this film that you would if you were in charge of the magazine. We had a handshake, and I said, I got a piece of paper from him, and I typed out a crude contract between Life magazine and me and Abraham Zapruder. We both signed it. I took 2 reels. I took the original and I took 1 copy. I said, is there a back door to this place? Because I don't want to go out through that crowd. And he took me to a back door. I went down into an alley, and he went out to face this very angry group of journalists.
He wasn't trying to get rich. You know, people have said to me, well, that's not what I'd have done. And, well, you don't know what you'd have done. It didn't happen to you. So it happened to him.
The editors and the publisher of Life finally got a chance to view the film on Sunday. And that is when the decision was made in New York that we should try to obtain all rights, not just print rights. So on Monday, I think Monday around noon, while the president was being buried and while all of America was watching television, I went to see Zapruder, this time in his lawyer's office. And we negotiated very quickly, without incident or argument or whatever, to $150,000, payable in $25,000 annual installments for all rights.
Consider the Kennedy assassination as foremost a homicide, and the Zapruder film as its most crucial piece of material evidence. And you have to keep in mind that within 48 hours after the shooting of the film and the shooting of the president, a private media entity had gotten physical control of it.
C.D. Jackson was the publisher of Life, and he was a very emotional man. And I think as far as C.D. was concerned, I think his main instinct was perhaps not competitive, but he wanted to spare, at least at that moment, the American public the horror of seeing this film.
The film itself was not seen for about a decade, and what we're seeing were a series of stills that were published in Life magazine in several different versions. So you have a rather extraordinary transformation of a very brief filmic narrative, 22 seconds, broken down into a series of stills, which become sort of iconographic emblems in their own right. What you don't see are the images of Kennedy's head actually being shot off. And what's interesting about the suppression of these actual murder shots is that instead of this being a sort of brutal slaying, it became a kind of elegiac exercise.
Life was the magazine that the American people looked up to for not only news, but tasteful presentation, and it's the reason we left out frame 313. It was clear the president, we have him slumped in the back of the car. It's clear that he's dead. We don't have to see his brains splattering all over the air. And the feeling was that the same, an extension of that feeling, had to do with the film, that it was bad enough to see it in still pictures. Let's don't show it in film.
Limited access to information always begets charges of conspiracy and intrigue. They may have thought at the time, best case scenario, that they were doing something on behalf of America, but by the same token, they created a context for doubt that haunts us today.
Film really has fueled the conspiracy industry for the past 3 decades in America, in some ways single-handedly. Since the film was purchased by Time Life originally from Abraham Zapruder, and they only published stills of it, the American public didn't see it en masse until the mid-1970s almost. So it gave the impression that there was something wonderful that had to be hidden in the film.
In the summer of 1966, the Zapruder film had been published, certain frames, in Life magazine. The film also was published sequentially, except for a few minor glitches, in one volume of the exhibits and hearings of the Warren Commission. Those reproductions were absolutely miserable. It was extremely difficult to see anything. Those 2 published versions were the only versions available to the public at large. If, in the summer of 1966, you showed that you were a, quote, valid researcher, you could go to the National Archives and persuade Marion Johnson, the archivist, who was in charge of the Kennedy papers, to take you to a small viewing room and there project the copy of the Zapruder film that had actually been used by the Warren Commission.
So a handful of people went to the archives and had the psychologically horrifying experience of looking at this film and seeing President Kennedy being thrown to the rear by a bullet which supposedly, according to the United States government, came from behind. And they saw this about 10, 15 blocks from the White House and wrote about it to their fellows researchers in letters and memos, and we were all horrified.
What was enormously frustrating was that one could see in the film that the Warren Commission used that it was very fuzzy. One heard rumors that a much clearer copy existed in the vaults of Time Incorporated. And from time to time one would hear rumors and stories of people who had seen Life's copy, and it was much clearer. So we were all tantalized by the possibility of this absolutely extraordinary evidence existing here in New York in a form that none of us could see.
Life has been accused of censoring or sitting on this film and The fact is that any responsible agency, police